Ellie Brooks had always been the kind of woman people described as reliable, the one who stayed late to finish a project, the one who remembered coworkers' birthdays, the one who held everything together even when life felt shaky under her feet. But on a gray Thursday afternoon in Milwaukee, all of that loyalty was returned with a single sentence that felt cold enough to bruise. "We're downsizing, Ellie. Today's your last day." The words were delivered politely, almost gently, by a manager who avoided eye contact. Ellie stood there, heart thudding, fingers trembling against the cardboard box they handed her. 7 years of dedication boiled down to 15 minutes in a scripted apology. She walked out of the office into the November wind, feeling hollow, as if the world had quietly stepped away from her. By the time she reached her tiny apartment, another blow waited, an eviction notice taped crookedly to her door. Past due. Final warning. She didn't have savings, just bills, a tank of gas, and the one creature who had never left her side. Marley, her faithful, golden-eyed mutt with a soft coat and a calmer heart than most people she knew. That night, the city felt unforgiving. Rain blurred every streetlight into a trembling halo as Ellie sat in her car, soaked, exhausted, and too heart-tired to cry. She scrolled through her phone looking for anything, jobs, shelters, miracle solutions that didn't exist. Instead, she stumbled across a late-night online auction listing. Old mountain cabin as is, Timberline Ridge, $180 starting bid. It looked like a joke. A single crooked photo, a tiny wooden cabin smothered in weeds, leaning as if apologizing for its own existence. No electricity guaranteed, no refunds, no questions answered. But the listing said, buy now, $180, the exact amount left in her checking account. Ellie laughed, a short, broken sound, because sometimes life backed you so far into a corner that the only thing left was a ridiculous choice, a desperate choice, a hopeful choice that felt reckless, brave, and strangely comforting all at once. "God, this is crazy," she whispered. Marley nudged her shoulder with a warm, understanding sigh. And before she could talk herself out of it, Ellie tapped buy now. 40 minutes later, she had directions, half legible, half wrong, to a cabin somewhere deep in the Wisconsin mountains. It was a long shot, a foolish one. But Ellie had nothing left except a tank of gas, a loyal dog, and the faint flickering belief that maybe starting over didn't always look pretty. Sometimes it looked like driving into the dark with everything you owned in the back seat, and choosing to hope anyway. By the time Ellie and Marley reached Timberline Ridge, the rain had thinned into a misty drizzle, the kind that clung to your clothes like a persistent, chilly whisper. The GPS had given up an hour earlier, proudly declaring, "You have arrived," even though nothing but pine trees and a winding dirt road stretched ahead. Ellie kept driving, trusting her gut and the faded directions the seller had emailed, half wrinkled from the damp on the passenger seat. The cabin appeared only when she rounded a sharp bend, as if the forest had reluctantly decided to reveal it. It stood crooked under a sagging roof, the wood weathered, darkened by years of storms and neglect. The porch leaned like an old man with tired joints. The front door hung slightly ajar, swaying with each breath of the wind. "This is it?" Ellie murmured, her voice a mix of disbelief and tired humor. Marley trotted ahead, tail low but curious, sniffing the damp boards. Ellie stepped onto the porch, feeling it tremble beneath her weight. The air smelled of pine sap, wet earth, and old memories, the kind that linger long after people leave. Inside the cabin was a single room, dim and hauntingly quiet. Dust motes floated in the beam of her flashlight. A wooden table stood against the wall, one leg propped up by a stack of yellowed newspapers. An iron bed frame leaned crookedly in the corner. The fireplace was cold, stuffed with brittle branches and the remnants of a long-forgotten fire. But what unsettled Ellie wasn't the mess. It was the feeling that the cabin had been paused, not abandoned, like the air was still holding on to someone's last breath. She shivered, brushing her thumb along the edge of the dusty table. Names were carved into the wood, initials really, barely visible under the grime. Marley suddenly whined at the far wall, claws tapping nervously on the creaking floorboards. "You okay, buddy?" Ellie whispered. The dog's ears pricked toward a shadowy corner, where the boards looked slightly newer than the rest, out of place, hesitant, almost as if someone had fixed them in a hurry. Ellie knelt, pressing a palm against the wood. Cold, solid, but something about it felt wrong, or maybe waiting. She took a breath, letting the quiet settle into her bones. Despite the unease, despite the fragility of the place, Ellie felt something unexpected rising in her chest, a small, stubborn thread of belonging. This broken little cabin wasn't much, but it was hers, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of warmth. Maybe life hadn't ended. Maybe it had simply shifted. Ellie woke to the sound of Marley pacing, his nails clicking anxiously against the wooden floor. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet. Only a soft, bluish haze seeped through the warped cabin windows. The air was cold, brittle, and strangely alert, as if the whole room had been holding its breath all night. "Marley, hey, what's wrong?" Ellie whispered, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The dog stood rigid near the fireplace, tail tucked, staring at the same patch of floor he'd fixated on the night before. His body trembled with a tension Ellie had never seen in him, a loyal dog suddenly unsure of the world around him. She knelt beside him, fingers brushing over the mismatched wooden boards. They felt firmer than the rest, newer, tighter, like someone had repaired only that square and ignored the entire crumbling floor around it. Ellie pressed harder. A faint, hollow sound echoed beneath her hand. Her heartbeat quickened. "No way," she breathed. She grabbed the small pry bar she'd found on the porch the day before. A rusted thing, but sturdy enough. It took effort, but the first nail loosened with a reluctant squeal. Marley whined, circling nervously, as if urging her forward and warning her back at the same time. When the last board came free, a cold draft rushed upward, carrying the musty, untouched scent of hidden years. Beneath the floor sat a narrow wooden cavity. Inside was a metal box, small, faded, and beautifully dented with time. Ellie hesitated, fingertips hovering over it. This felt personal, private, but curiosity, gentle, trembling, vulnerable curiosity, pushed her forward. The latch on the box stuck, then gave way with a soft snap. Inside lay a stack of letters tied with fraying twine, a tarnished silver locket, a handful of old receipts and folded notes, a tiny brass key, no bigger than her pinky, and at the bottom a photograph curled at the edges. Ellie lifted the photo carefully. A young couple stood in front of the cabin, fresh paint, bright windows, wildflowers blooming along the porch. The woman's smile was warm but tired, her eyes carrying a fragile brightness. The man had his hand on her shoulder, steady, protective. Written on the back in soft pencil, Helen and Warren Miller, May 1986. Ellie swallowed, feeling the weight of the picture settle in her chest. These weren't just strangers. This had been someone's home, someone's dream, someone's fragile attempt at a life tucked away in the mountains. She looked around the dim cabin, the sagging roof, the peeling walls, the silence that felt too full. "Where did you go?" she whispered. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the cabin walls, almost like an answer she wasn't ready to understand. The fog rolled in faster than Ellie expected that afternoon, thick, heavy, and unnervingly quiet, swallowing the trees one by one until the forest became nothing but pale shadows. She stepped outside to gather firewood, and when she turned back, Marley was gone. "Marley?" Her voice cracked through the mist, small and frantic. No answering bark, no rustling leaves, just the steady hush of mountain air, strangely hollow. Ellie's chest tightened. Marley had never wandered far. He was too loyal, too cautious, too tuned to her emotions. She jogged toward the creek, boots sliding in the wet leaves, calling his name again and again, her voice thinning with each echo. Then she heard it, a faint scratching, desperate and rhythmic, somewhere near the ferns by the old oak tree. Ellie pushed through the fog until she saw Marley's golden shape, trembling, paws digging furiously at a moss-covered mound of earth. "What are you doing, buddy?" she whispered, breath shaking. As she knelt beside him, her palm brushed a cold metal ring embedded in the ground. Hidden beneath layers of moss was a square outline of rotting wood, a hatch. Ellie hesitated, fear settling deep in her stomach, a fragile, trembling fear of opening things meant to stay closed. But Marley nudged her hand softly, urging her forward with his warm, trusting eyes. Taking a steady breath, Ellie pulled the ring. The hatch groaned, resisting like something with a memory. then released a wave of damp, ancient air that smelled of earth, apples, and the sadness of years sealed away. A narrow set of wooden steps led downward into darkness. "Okay," Ellie whispered. "We're doing this." With her phone flashlight clenched between shaking fingers, she descended the creaking steps, feeling every inch of the cabin's history pressing in around her. At the bottom, she found a small underground room lined with shelves. Jars of old preserves, dusty tools, a shovel worn smooth from use. But her attention snapped to the stone wall at the far end, where a square panel sat flush against the surface, secured only by a tiny lock. Her breath caught. The brass key from the metal box upstairs. Ellie slid the key in. The lock clicked, a delicate, almost sorrowful sound. Inside the panel was a shallow niche containing a tin strongbox, several soft cloth-bound notebooks, and a small cassette recorder with 3 tapes wrapped in wax paper. Each tape was carefully labeled in neat handwriting. "For whoever finds this, tape 1-3. Ellie's fingers trembled as she lifted the recorder. In the stillness of the root cellar, cold, fragile, honest, she pressed play. A woman's voice, gentle but weary, filled the room. "My name is Helen Miller. If you're listening, then we didn't make it back." Ellie froze, pulse hammering, as the truth began to unfold in the darkness. Ellie sat on the cold cellar floor, the recorder still humming faintly beside her. Helen Miller's voice, tender, frayed, heartbreakingly human, lingered in the air like a candle struggling to stay lit. "If someone finds this someday, please understand. We were trying to hold on. We just didn't know how." The tape clicked off. Ellie closed her eyes, her chest tightening with a grief that wasn't hers but felt painfully familiar. She imagined Helen alone in this room 40 years ago, battling storms inside her mind that no one saw. A woman overwhelmed, exhausted, aching for peace, believing the glow in the woods was some sort of answer. Ellie felt the weight of the secrets, the desperation, the silence women often carry quietly until it breaks them. Marley pressed his warm head into Ellie's shoulder, grounding her as the truth settled like dust around them. "Come on," she whispered, voice trembling but steady enough to follow. "Let's get some air." Upstairs, the cabin felt different. Still worn, still lonely, but no longer empty. It held stories now. It held faces. It held the quiet, gentle ache of people who once lived, loved, and lost here. Ellie placed the tapes, notebooks, and strongbox carefully on the table. Taking a slow breath, she flipped open the strongbox again. Inside were U.S. savings bonds, worth far more than Helen or Warren could have saved in their lifetime, along with a notarized deed transferring ownership of the land to whoever discovers this and chooses to care for it. Ellie felt her throat tighten. Care for it, not own it, not profit from it, just care. It was the first time in months she felt truly seen. Over the next few days, Ellie repaired what she could, patching screens, tightening screws, sweeping out years of abandonment. She made the bed from the old iron frame. She sanded the wobbly table until it felt smooth under her palms. She hung a small lantern on the porch, letting it glow warm through the night, a soft invitation for anyone who needed a place to breathe. One quiet morning, a dusty green pickup truck rolled slowly up the road. A man in his 60s stepped out, weathered but kind, carrying a carton of eggs. "You must be the new caretaker," he said simply. Caretaker. The word landed gently, like something that had been waiting for her. The man, Tom Patterson, had been the mail carrier back when the Millers lived here. He told Ellie what the newspaper never did, how Helen had struggled after giving birth, how the town back then didn't know how to help, how Warren blamed himself until the day he disappeared. "They were good folks," Tom said softly. "Just overwhelmed. Happens more often than people admit." Ellie nodded, swallowing the ache in her throat. That night, she lit a fire and played the second tape. Helen's voice this time was calmer, more resigned, but still full of love. "If you're listening, whoever you are, this cabin is meant to be a stopping place for women who are tired, for people who need quiet. Don't let it disappear again." Ellie pressed her hand to her heart. She knew what she had to do. Over the weeks that followed, word quietly spread. Sometimes through Tom, sometimes through strangers who showed up at twilight looking fragile and lost. Sometimes through nothing more than the mountain's whisper. Ellie welcomed them, a young mother fleeing an unhealthy home, a retired nurse grieving a lifetime of caregiving, a girl whose family had moved too many times to count. Ellie never asked for their stories. She only asked, tea or water. And every night, when the lantern glowed on the porch, the cabin felt less haunted by sorrow and more filled with redemption, soft courage, and the steady hum of lives trying to begin again. One evening, as fog curled along the tree line, Ellie stepped onto the porch with Marley at her side. A faint, warm glow flickered in the woods, not threatening anymore, just steady and patient, like a reminder that healing rarely comes all at once. Sometimes it comes in small, gentle pieces. She whispered into the quiet, "We're okay now, we're staying." The mountains seemed to nod back. Let me ask you this. If you were in Ellie's place, lost, exhausted, standing in the doorway of a broken cabin, would you have the courage to stay and start over? Or would you walk away? If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, human stories that stay with you. Your support helps bring more heartfelt tales to life.